I was still in the conference room when I realized my manager had just stolen 2 years of my work, and every single person in that room thought it was his idea. Before I get into how it all went wrong, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know who's here for the whole truth. My name's Daniel Cross. I'm 38 years old, born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. I've spent my whole adult life working in industrial engineering, designing, streamlining, and fixing the systems that keep manufacturing plants running. It's not glamorous, but when you've stood inside a roaring plant on a freezing February morning, the air tasting like steel and steam, and watched 1,000 tons of machinery move in perfect rhythm because of something you built, it sticks with you. I'd been at Midland Steel Components for 13 years. Started as a junior process engineer, working the night shift on a plant floor that smelled of hot oil and coolant, until I worked my way up to senior design lead. We made the precision steel assemblies that go into automotive transmissions. Boring to most people, but critical to companies like Ford and GM. And Cleveland? We live and die by that kind of work. The last 3 years had been rough. Management kept talking about efficiency mandates and cost realignments, which everyone knew was just corporate speak for layoffs. Whole departments disappeared. Guys I'd known since I was 25 were called into HR and escorted out before lunch. And with the rumors that Midland might close its Euclid plant altogether, the air in the building felt heavier every day. For me, the pressure wasn't just professional. My younger sister Erin had been diagnosed with lupus the year before, and I'd been covering a lot of her medical bills after her insurance maxed out. My mortgage was stretched thin, and I'd already pulled from my savings more times than I wanted to admit. If Midland cut me loose, I wasn't sure how I'd keep it all together. That's why my process overhaul project mattered so much. It wasn't just another assignment, it was my shot to prove I was worth keeping when the axe swung. I'd been working on it quietly for nearly 2 years, often staying past midnight, rewriting designs, running simulations on my laptop at home. The idea was simple in theory. Redesign one of our high-volume stamping lines so it could produce 2 separate components on the same equipment without the downtime and retooling that usually kills productivity. If it worked, Midland could save millions every year and protect hundreds of jobs. I hadn't told many people the details, just my manager, Frank Weller. He was in his mid-50s, balding, with the kind of belly you get from too many steak lunches on the company dime. He'd been at Midland forever, always finding a way to float up the org chart without getting his hands dirty. I figured if I kept him in the loop, he'd help me present it to the executives when it was ready. I was wrong. The first red flag came a week before the presentation. Frank called me into his office and asked for a quick run-through of my work. Said the execs wanted a high-level preview so they could schedule time for the formal pitch. He asked for my CAD files, simulation results, even the process flow diagrams I'd been refining for months. I gave them to him. Hell, I even polished the data sets so they'd be easy to read. Then, the morning of the big meeting, I got an email saying the schedule had been moved up. Urgent review, 9 a.m., main conference room, and that I didn't need to present after all. Frank said it was just a pre-read and my turn would come later. I should have known right then. When I walked into that conference room, the first thing I saw was Frank standing at the head of the table, my slides on the screen, with my name removed. I remember the feeling like it was yesterday, that cold rush through my chest, like all the blood had drained out of me at once. Frank was in his element, pacing as he explained the innovative new approach to our stamping line. He hit every point I'd spent months perfecting, right down to the phrasing in my proposal. The execs were leaning forward, nodding, impressed. A couple even clapped when he showed the projected savings. And me? I was just another body at the table, watching my work get stripped of my name, my history, my future. When the VP of operations said, "Frank, this is game-changing. We need to move on this immediately," I felt my stomach turn. Then came the final twist of the knife. This is exactly the kind of leadership we need from our senior managers right now. Leadership. That was the moment I knew. Not just that Frank had stolen my work, but that the company would back him. No one in that room would care enough to dig deeper. I didn't say a word. Not then. Not for the rest of the meeting. But something shifted inside me. I knew I wasn't going to let it slide. The meeting broke up after an hour. People left in pairs, chatting about how brilliant Frank's plan was. Nobody looked at me. When Frank finally turned toward me, he had that fake mentor smile he always used, The one that made you think he was about to congratulate you. Instead, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Glad you could sit in, Dan. We'll loop you in for implementation once the execs approve the budget." Loop me in like I was some junior intern lucky to get a peek at the grown-ups' work. I didn't answer, just nodded once, gathered my notepad, and walked out before my face betrayed anything. The next few days felt wrong. People on the floor avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when I walked into the break room. My buddy from the maintenance crew, Lise, gave me a half-apologetic look but didn't say much. I didn't need to ask. I knew Frank had been clarifying the project's history to make sure everyone saw him as the genius behind it. The worst part? I couldn't even prove it. Yet. Everything I'd worked on was on the company server, and Frank had admin access. If he scrubbed my name from the file history, there'd be no trace. And I couldn't just go to HR around here. HR wasn't there to protect you. They were there to protect the company. Going in without rock-solid proof would just get me labeled as bitter or difficult, and in a place already teetering on layoffs, that would be the kiss of death. At home, I tried to push it out of my mind, but it followed me everywhere. Erin called one night after her latest treatment. She sounded exhausted, her voice shaky, but she still asked how work was going. I lied, told her things were steady, told her the company valued my work. She didn't need the stress, not when her immune system was already fighting itself. After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. My mortgage payment was due in a week, and after covering Erin's prescriptions, I'd barely have enough to scrape by. If Frank's theft meant I missed out on a promotion, or worse, got cut in the next downsizing wave, it wasn't just my pride on the line. It was my home, my sister's care, my entire life. The turning point came on a Thursday afternoon. I was at my desk reviewing some minor design updates for the stamping line, the same line my overhaul plan was meant to revolutionize, when I got a meeting invite. Subject: Implementation Roadmap Review, Frank Weller. I opened the attached agenda. It was my plan, my timelines, my exact milestones. But instead of designed by Daniel Cross, it read, Lead, Frank Weller. Support, TBD, support. That's what I'd been reduced to. Something inside me went still. Not rage, not yet, just a cold, steady awareness. If I wanted to take him down, I couldn't just storm in and demand credit. I had to make it undeniable. I had to make it so that when the truth came out, even HR wouldn't be able to spin it. That night, I dug out my personal laptop and a portable hard drive I'd bought years ago. I started combing through my personal email for any backups I might have sent myself. Then I remembered something. I'd often worked on this project from home during late nights, before the company issued encrypted remote logins, which meant some of those early CAD files and diagrams were still sitting in my personal archives, time-stamped and untouched. And if I could cross-reference them with the company's own logs, if I could get a copy before Frank accidentally deleted them, I might have my smoking gun. Over the next week, I played my role perfectly. Nodded in meetings, took minor assignments, let Frank believe I'd rolled over. But every spare moment I was collecting. Early prototypes, revision notes with my initials in the metadata, even screenshots of Slack messages where Frank had approved my approach months earlier. I started keeping it all on an encrypted flash drive I carried in my wallet. It was overkill, maybe, but I couldn't shake the thought of Frank accidentally finding my personal drive if I left it in my desk. The last piece fell into place one Friday afternoon. I was in the server room, officially to check a corrupted file for a maintenance request, when I noticed something in the logs, an archived copy of my project folder from 6 months ago. It had my name on every document. I copied it to my flash drive before anyone else walked in. My heart was pounding the whole time, but when I slid that little drive into my pocket, I knew I finally had what I needed. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it yet, but I knew one thing. Frank thought he'd stolen my future. He had no idea I was about to take his. Frank wasn't the first person to steal credit in this company, just the most arrogant about it. I started talking quietly with people who had been in my position before. A senior engineer named Mike told me about a project he'd lost to Frank 2 years ago. A designer in R&D named Sarah admitted she'd stopped proposing innovations after Frank took one of her ideas and reframed it in front of the VP. They weren't bitter, they were defeated, and that made them dangerous allies. Over coffee in the plant cafeteria, I asked harmless-sounding questions. When did you give Frank that prototype file? Do you remember who was CC'd on the email? They didn't know it yet, but they were feeding me a map. The next step was making sure I was in the right room at the right time. Manufacturing companies like ours, Midland Industrial Solutions, don't make decisions in one meeting. Everything's layered: department reviews, division planning, corporate alignment sessions. Frank was riding high, and with corporate's interest in his process improvement model, he'd be presenting to the CEO within 2 months. I made myself useful again, but not to Frank. I offered to help the operations director, Lavra, with a side project tracking production line inefficiencies. I stayed late running reports, tweaking graphs, offering just enough insight to make her wonder how the company had ever considered laying me off. By week 3, Lavra was telling me, "Daniel, you should sit in on the next cross-division planning meeting. Your data could be useful." Exactly what I needed. But it wasn't enough to just be there. I needed undeniable, irrefutable proof. I still had the original files for my process model, time-stamped, archived, and sent to my personal email. They weren't just technical diagrams. They included drafts, sketches, and my handwritten notes scanned from a spiral notebook I'd used in my garage on winter nights when my breath fogged in the cold air. The clincher? A video clip I'd recorded for myself months ago when testing the prototype. My voice explaining the logic, the machinery behind me running the early version of the model. The date stamp was right there in the corner. On their own, those files might look like just evidence. But if played at the right moment, in front of the right people, they'd be a detonator. By the time the day of the cross-division meeting arrived, I had my plan. Frank would walk in thinking it was his stage. He'd smile, shake hands, bask in the attention. And when he was halfway through explaining my innovation to the CEO, I dropped the curtain. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to accuse. I just needed to let the truth speak, in front of everyone who mattered. And when it did, his fall would be loud enough for the whole company to hear. Frank walked into the conference room like he owned it. Black suit, silver tie, the kind of posture that says I'm untouchable. He shook the CEO's hand, clapped the VP of operations on the back, and gave me a brief glance like I was a piece of furniture he barely remembered approving for purchase. I sat at the far end of the table, laptop open, calm as a surgeon before the first incision. The meeting began with the usual small talk. Lavra gave a quick update on production targets. The CFO mumbled about raw material costs, and then it was Frank's turn. He stood, cleared his throat, and started clicking through a deck full of my work. The graphics were cleaner, the corporate fonts swapped in, but I could see my fingerprints all over it. Every chart, every flow diagram, mine. Frank was in his element, pacing as he explained his streamlined production cycle, the data savings, the efficiency projections. The CEO leaned forward, clearly impressed. I watched, expressionless, taking small sips of coffee. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, but on the outside I was stone. When Frank reached the part about initial development, I spoke up for the first time. "Frank, could you pull up slide 12? He frowned, caught off guard, but clicked back. The slide was a diagram of the early-stage model, my model, stripped of context. I turned to Lavra. "Mind if I share something? I think it might help everyone understand how this evolved." She nodded. The CEO waved for me to go ahead. I connected my laptop to the projector. The screen flickered, and then a grainy video filled it. In the clip, I was in my garage, wearing an old Cleveland Browns hoodie, explaining the mechanics of a test rig. Behind me, the prototype was running, loud, imperfect, but unmistakably the early version of the exact system Frank was presenting. The timestamp glowed in the corner, January 14th to 11th months before Frank's first concept meeting. I clicked again. Up came a scanned page from my notebook. Diagrams, handwritten notes, coffee stains. The header read, "Cycle Efficiency Optimization, Draft 1, Daniel Cross." The room went still. I didn't look at Frank, but I could feel the heat coming off him. "Just thought it might be useful to see the origin," I said quietly, closing my laptop. "That way everyone has the full picture." The CEO sat back, eyes shifting between me and Frank. "How did you say this came to you, Frank?" Frank's jaw worked like he was chewing gravel. I collaborated with the team and..." "That's interesting." The CEO cut in, "because I don't see your name anywhere on these originals." The rest of the meeting was a slow, awkward collapse for him. His slides were still on the screen, but no one was looking at them. Every question went to me. Every note the VP took had my name beside it. By the end, the CEO asked me to stay behind for a quick chat. Frank walked out pale, carrying his laptop like it weighed 50 pounds. The CEO didn't commit to anything in that private chat. No one in corporate ever does, but his message was clear. This is concerning. We'll need to review the situation. I walked out of that building knowing one thing. The wheels had started turning. Frank didn't just lose the spotlight that day. He'd just been marked for a very public, very professional dismantling, and I wasn't done. Not even close. It took 3 weeks for the review process to finish. 3 weeks of polite, clipped hallway interactions. 3 weeks of Frank avoiding me like I carried a contagious disease. 3 weeks of me working as if nothing had happened. Head down, hitting targets, answering questions with crisp professionalism. I knew better than to push. In corporate America, you don't win by shouting. You win by letting the facts tighten around your opponent like a noose. On a rainy Thursday morning, Laura walked past my desk and said, "CEO wants you in the big conference room at 10. Bring your notes." When I stepped inside, the CEO, Laura, the VP of Operations, and the HR director were already seated. Frank was there too. No suit today, just a wrinkled shirt and a look that told me he hadn't slept. The HR director got straight to it. "Frank, after reviewing documentation, timestamps, and witness statements, we've determined that the concept you presented as your own was, in fact, developed solely by Daniel Cross. This violates company ethics policy sections 4.2 and 5.1. She paused. "Effective immediately, your employment is terminated." Frank didn't take it quietly. "This is bull. Daniel's just," he started, but the CEO cut him off. "We've seen the original videos, the notebooks, the emails. We've also confirmed with vendors that Daniel's prototypes predate any record of your involvement." Frank looked around for an ally, but no one would meet his eyes. His shoulders slumped. "You're making a mistake." The CEO's voice was like steel. The mistake was thinking no one would notice. Security walked him out. He didn't look back. By Monday, word had spread. In a manufacturing company, gossip travels faster than steel on a conveyor belt. People in the break room stopped mid-sentence when I walked in. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Laura gave me a nod one afternoon that said more than any speech could. But the real moment came a week later, at the quarterly shareholder meeting. The CEO stood on stage, spotlight bright, praising Daniel Cross's groundbreaking efficiency system, in front of a room full of investors. My designs, cleaned up but still mine, filled the massive projector screen. When the applause started, I didn't smile, I just nodded, hands in my pockets. Frank's name was never mentioned. Not once. Later, over the hum of post-meeting chatter, I overheard an investor ask the CEO, "What happened to the other guy?" The CEO's answer was simple. "He's no longer relevant." That night, I drove home through light snow, the kind that melts as soon as it hits the ground. My old Browns hoodie was still hanging on the hook by the door, the same one I'd worn in that garage video. I poured a glass of bourbon, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out the notebook with cycle efficiency optimization. Draft 1 on the cover. I didn't flip through it. I didn't need to. Frank was gone. My name was in the company archives, in the press releases, in the shareholder reports. He'd lost his job, his credibility, and whatever fragile network of trust he had in this industry. I took a slow sip, the ice clinking against the glass. No apologies. No forgiveness. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing the game was over, and I'd won. If you enjoyed this story, please give a thumbs up to the video and consider subscribing to the channel for more powerful true life stories.